Welcome to the Lead Like a Boss podcast. Advice and inspiration from real entrepreneurs for real entrepreneurs just like you. Hey everybody, this is George K from Lead Like a Boss. I've got another great episode for you today, and I've got Mohamed Hamad from Third Wunder. He's a digital marketer that is making waves on the scene. Mohamed, thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much, George. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for having me on your show.
You're very, very welcome. You know, I've never had anyone saying, you know what, George, I hate being on the show. And yeah, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Mohamed, I love your style. I've been checking out your stuff online. You've got a relaxed, easygoing manner about how you do stuff. But for the purposes of helping our guests, whether they're watching or whether they're listening, you know, the digital marketing space is crowded, to say the least. There's lots of people out there doing it. Lots of young people trying to break into the space. Obviously, since COVID, being online has just exploded. First of all, how long have you been in the game? How long have you been doing this?
It's been a hot minute. Running the agency Third Wunder, we've been around for about 10 years. Prior to that, I was a digital strategist at a digital marketing agency here that got bought out by a large multinational. And before that, I was accidentally into digital marketing when I first moved to Canada. I joined a small, scrappy little startup when Facebook just opened up its doors and API to everybody, and we were developing an app on the Facebook API. And that's how we learned the ropes on digital marketing. It didn't exist at that point. And then, boom, we had global reach instantaneously, which was a wild concept at the time.
Imagine, eh? Wow.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said for timing. I don't know how many times I have this conversation with owners and they say things like, oh, Facebook is for kids. I'm like, what? Like the average age of Facebook people are like, I think it's way over 50 now, right?
Oh, yeah. Like in the beginning, sure. You know, it was college kids, it was teenagers, people just getting online and stuff like that. But these days, Facebook is everywhere. Facebook is events. Facebook is marketplace. It's groups, blogging, advertising, and the average age group, yeah, it's aged out. It's whoever was in their 20s and 30s 18 years ago is now in their late 40s, early 50s, going on to 60s. And at the same time, we kind of co-opted our our parents and our great-grandparents to share videos, to share and photos at the time. So, you know, we've gotten all of these people onto it, then decided it wasn't cool and we left.
All right. So again, to use your expression, you've been in the game for a hot minute. Things have changed. Mm-hmm. I want to get into your backstory and learn about some of the hurdles that you had to overcome, you know, obviously within the context of B.O.S.S, like Bravery, Optimism, security, and sustainability. So I'd like to talk to you about some of those stories that you had to deal with as you were coming up, as you were building groups, building teams. You went through a buyout. So there must be some great stories in and around that topic. But you're 19, 20 years old, you're all into online, you think you're going to be the next Gary Vaynerchuk, and you're going out there. What advice would you give to those young people trying to make their way in the digital marketing space today?
Advice for youngins, it's a fast moving world. One day you thought you become the expert on everything, and then every platform pulls the rug under you, or governments change rules and regulations, or a hot new product comes in and disrupts the entire industry, and you have to learn it all from scratch. So being someone that is open to learning and fast at learning is the key thing. The digital space isn't like, let's say, engineering or architecture that have been around for millennia and the fundamentals around it have been around.
It's hard to change the gravity algorithm.
Exactly. You know, gravity, and Pythagorean theorem has been around since the Greeks, so it hasn't changed. But online, people's tastes changed, global events like, the 2008 crisis all the way up to the pandemic, really changed people's way of life
Yeah.
and their outlook on communication online, connection, purchasing, even the type of things they go to, or sense of humor.
Yeah.
If you go back maybe 20 years, sense of humor was a very different thing than what we have right now.
Yeah. There was no Me Too 20 years ago.
Exactly. And that's changed how things are being portrayed online. So it's always a moving target. So whoever's coming into this to this space, there's fundamentals of human communication and psychology, but the medium and the race you're in is a whole different ballgame every week.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of the old days where you had, specialists. You had an ad copy specialist, you had a layout specialist, you had different specialists for different aspects of the marketing game. And I think that, it's hard to be an expert in everything. I guess it's really important to have a team of people around you who have certain lanes that they like to follow, and surround yourself with people who are really good at specific things, so that you can delegate the appropriate lane to the appropriate person.
I would say that the lanes also have been blurred a little bit,
Oh yeah.
in that, being a copywriting specialist, for instance, you still need to understand the different platforms and the different medias you're writing for. Right nowadays, let's say copywriters, they're writing scripts for YouTube, they're writing, Google Ads copy, they're writing social media posts, log form blog posts, readapting news articles, press releases. They're doing a lot. And that means, one, they need to understand the platform. So having, and not necessarily being experts at every single thing, but having a little bit of leeway on either side of what they do. Being understanding of, design basics of why a piece of content would work in a different space because of the limitations, let's say, of character limit or the audience that it's in. How
Or
to
even the
write content.
formatting. I mean, some platforms, their formatting is different than others.
Well, absolutely. You'll see it on, let's say, LinkedIn, where you can't have bullet lists, so people are using emojis to express different layouts. But if you go over to a newsletter, you have that. And the same thing applies for, let's say, design. In design, you need to know you need to understand the user experience. All
Hmm.
right. So there's a little bit of user experience. There's a little bit of design. You also need to know, what are you actually saying? So there's a lot of collaboration with copywriters, the marketing specialists, the social media specialists, to understand where people are coming from, how are they receiving the message, and where they're going to go next. All right. So everybody, I feel like, in a marketing team needs to know a little bit about everybody else's role, so that they're easy to grab that baton when they're all sprinting for the race.
Yeah, so there's like that cross training element that has to take place, and as you said earlier, like constant cross training. So again, it all boils down to really good communication. When someone in your team learns something new or finds out something new, share it quickly with the rest of the team, so that they all are brought up to speed and kept up to speed.
Oh, absolutely. Communication is key in this fast-paced landscape, and yeah, the more cohesive a team is, and the flatter the organization in terms of learning from each other, the much better the outcome.
I was chuckling to myself because, 20 years ago, I was having the same conversation with leaders, like the whole idea of, people siloing things and, oh, I really know how to do this. So this thing is mine and it's going to make me, unique and special in the organization and all that stuff. And, having to break down those silos and break down those attitudes. And it's the same conversation. Everyone's got to share.
Absolutely. There's a rise of the generalist, and to a certain degree,
Mm,
everybody has to have a little bit of a generalist in them,
yeah.
and not to be too precious about exactly what they do. And this is how I do it, and this is the only thing that I do. There was in some industries, absolutely. If you go to medicine, a surgeon is a surgeon, and that's all they do is surgery, and that's because it's such a high functioning and very specialized space. But in the world of dealing with people, it's communication at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about some nuts and bolts. So let's go back. So think of a time where you were faced with an issue. Either you with a member of your team, or maybe you with someone who you reported to. Think of a time where you had to address speaking to power, so to speak, or you being the power and having to come down on someone from a bravery point of view. Can you share a story with us that basically helps younger people in the business world, people who are a little earlier on in their entrepreneurial journey, to help us understand the importance of bravery? And I don't mean bravery from the point of showing off or heroism. I'm talking about bravery from the point of view of sticking to your guns, sticking to your commitments, maybe sticking to the values of your organization. Those things are really important for people to understand.
Yeah, so this is something it's very interesting that happens quite a lot in organizations, especially when there's a power dynamic and there's personal views about certain things become a little bit toxic or antagonistic to a team's values, for instance. I'll say this in this space of, discrimination of any sort, whether it's sexism, racism, or xenophobia in any way.
Or even politics these days. That's getting very, very polarized.
Very polarizing. And, sometimes we have clients that will, say something very disparaging to a team member, not knowing that it's something that's just, second nature to them, but it might be taken in a very different way, especially for someone from a different culture or gender orientation. And in that respect, being able to speak up, either, let's say, speak up to your direct reports, that you're able to express that something has happened that you weren't cool with, or you took offense to it, and being able to articulate what was the issue and why. But also as leadership is also to be open and responsive to that, and to be able to give your team the space to hear them out and to show action on it. This is a lifelong learning. It's not something that
you don't get a certificate and then you're done, right?
No. I mean, there's certifications of DEI and all of that, but it's the application of it on the daily is tougher than most people think, and there's no shortage of surprises there. So having an open mind, making sure that you're open to listen, and also to be able to talk it out respectfully with people is a big one. Sometimes people get defensive. People don't like what they hear, or don't feel safe about speaking out or receiving criticism in a situation. And that's the tough part there.
So let's say you're in a situation where, let's say you've got to deliver some harsh criticism, or maybe you've got to let somebody know that, hey, you're not pulling your weight on the team, and if things don't change, we're going to have to, make some tough decisions. How do you address those types of situations? What's your method? How do you prep yourself for that kind of a conversation?
Oh, that's prepping
this
yourself.
Is lead like a boss, man. We get to the nitty gritty.
Yeah, prepping yourself for it. Go for a run.
I think that's a great point. I think that for people listening, whether you're whichever side of the desk you're on in that situation, I think people underestimate how tough it is for the leader to have to deal with those types of conversations. I think the person on the other side of the desk thinks, oh, woe is me, oh me, me, but they don't realize the stress and the anxiety that the leader is going through when they have to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of leaders out there that make it very, very easy to be very dismissive, or treat their employees like numbers, or are not, not consciously or not consciously aware of where they stand in the system. But if you are a conscious leader, you're connected with your team, you view them as extensions of the organization in itself, and they're their ability to perform and to perform happily is core to your business. I think that becomes tough, because if you have to deliver bad news, that becomes super tough. In saying that, if you position yourself in that this is a point of conversation where we both come out of it with a positive, that this is not an indictment of the person in themselves, but a stepping stone to improvement, that becomes a different story. So the mindset that you have is not to to finger wag or to denigrate in a way, or to reprimand. It's to say, look, we need to work on certain things, and always ask if they have feedback to you. What is it that you can do better to help them achieve more, or to get better at their role? If they need training, if they need more resources or support, if they're having a hard time in their personal lives or not, how does that impact them? And understanding that makes for better conversation.
Yeah, I think that's super critical. Now, being someone who's seen a lot of the changes over the years, we talked a little bit of Me Too, and the changing sensibilities of the general public, especially post COVID. The tables have turned a little bit in terms of the power dynamic between the employers and their teams. When you hear these stereotypical types of comments where they're saying things like, oh, these Gen Xers or these Gen Yers or whatever the heck the number is, the alphas, the betas, the gammas, I don't know what number they're putting on these things these days, but they always say the same thing. Oh, these folks, they're, fill in the blank, they're entitled, they're this, they're that, like when you face that kind of that talk, that type, how do you react to that as a leader when it comes to dealing with individual members of your team, like not the mass, but the individual members of the team? How are you able to disassociate that kind of noise from the person that you're dealing with?
That again is very nuanced. Absolutely, there are differences in the generations in terms of the environment that they grew up in and what they've seen and how they've learned, and what is it about the culture at the time that's shaped them. The conversations about the younger folk, millennials or zillennials or Gen Alpha or whatever it is, it's every generation's gone off and complained about the next one. They're like, oh, they don't do it the way we do it. And back in my day, walked up the hill barefoot in the snow, and you guys have it easy with Ubers,
Yeah, we never use calculators. We used abacus.
But at the same time, each generation's kind of seen things and has experienced things in a very different light. And to be understanding of that it takes a little work. But I mean, if you think about it, let's say millennials, anybody from 1980 plus, how many unprecedented world events have they gone through in the last, decade and a half? Once in a lifetime has been 4 or 5 times now. So yeah, give them a break.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think what you said, they used the word understanding. I think it's always been the case where the more you know about the other person, their situation, you mentioned maybe their home situation, maybe, their environment, knowing the person individually. You talked about asking questions, find out what's going on in their world. I don't think there's enough of that going on. I know what you think, but this whole idea of, don't get into my space, and it's my personal this and my personal that. What do you think about this idea of the whole boundaries thing? It's like, do you think that people are being a little too sensitive about that, and people should be a little bit more open to communicate on those levels so that you can have that deeper understanding?
I mean, to each their own, in that everybody has different varying boundaries. I've certainly had, ranges of employees in age and demographics that had very different communication styles and boundaries. And this could be from a cultural perspective or a regional perspective, a linguistic perspective. They have their own you know what, I'm here to do a job and I'm going to do it really well, and I'll fraternize with everybody and all of that. But there's certain things about my life that I want out of this space. And a lot more people are very open and candid about everything. Setting boundaries is very normal, and people should be respectful of that. But also, having open and candid conversations about your life, your experiences. It's about connections, and this is sort of like where things like Sanka sets and after hours drinks or going out for lunch or whatever it is, they don't have to tell you everything about everything, but just from the way they act or behave or joke or the movies they've seen or the hobbies that they're into, without going into too many details, they can tell you a lot about someone.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh, yeah. I mean, we rely a lot on, like, I use a lot of psychometric testing when I'm working with clients and whatnot. And I mean, that's okay. It does fill one lane of information, but nothing beats seeing somebody interacting with people in different environments. Like, there's the work environment. You talked about like a Sanka set, a happy hour type of environment. Maybe you go play softball with the team, and that's another environment. I think the more you see people in different environments, the more rounded an idea you have of who they are as a person, which makes, of course, the team dynamic work better.
absolutely. And there's also things about like their extracurriculars, like
Mm-hmm.
if that could tell a lot about someone. Even let's say the generation before me would always balk about the idea of people playing a lot of video games. But one thing I
Yeah.
learned about people playing video games, what type of video games, competitive, Street Fighter style video games means that they're very competitive. If it's online multiplayer video games, they're very strong in communication, will embody the role that they've chosen within a team, and can work strategically with others. You've got, strategy games, what you call it, depends on the video game. Uh, I've had team members that love to crochet. It makes me feel like they've got attention to detail and can focus on something until they get it right. So it's all about the things that they're interested in and how they take that that quality that they have for the things that they dedicate in their spare time. How does that apply to what they're doing in their craft and their work, which is 8 hours a day to a certain degree. They do it almost as much as they sleep, and they spend more time with the team that they're in than their own families to a certain degree.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you pull the best out of them in during the time that they're with you.
So, okay, so that's a great topic we're leading into with regards to security. I don't know if you've read Netflix No Rules, Reed Hastings, and I always forget her name. I'll put it in the show notes. His VP of HR at the time. I don't know if she's still with them or not, but they worked hard to build a culture of candor, and they kind of boiled it into the employee handbook. Like, candor is part of what we do here, just like logging into the computer and using your username and password. Well, candor is also part of what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
Speak to us a little bit of what you think about, like, maybe not putting the term radical candor in there, but the idea of saying it's your job to be open to accepting criticism. And now, I'm not going to criticize you in a harsh, abusive way, but as an employee of this company, you have to be okay and open to receiving criticism on a regular basis. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Receiving criticism is a tricky thing because at the end of the day, it's about the delivery, sometimes about the message, sometimes about the delivery, sometimes about the context, and the person themselves. Some people are very open about being made fun of openly. You've got that friend, that always laughs at a joke at their, and they don't really take it seriously. But some others. Are quite sensitive and being sensitive to that. In saying that, candor is great as long as it's respectful and within the boundaries of that individual. It can be very exhausting, I have to say, having to always remember every single person's nuances um, and thought processes and sensitivities. But if you have a baseline that you work off in that, this is how you deliver your messages, and to your team itself, they know who you are and how you will deliver things, and you treat everybody equally. You have a baseline there that if something spikes up, that's an anomaly. It is this is how things are. If you're too volatile, it's really hard to connect with you. So having a um, giving them the sense of security that there's going to be a level of communication that is standardized across the board.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to it. You've been around long enough to know that, if you understand the culture of your team, if you get what the culture of your team is, that message needs to be transmitted all the way through to the HR department, so that when they're recruiting people, if you've got, that group where everyone's slapping each other in the back and telling it like it is, and laughing it off, and not worrying about, stressing out all over all the little things, and you bring someone in that's really sensitive and is not cool with that, then that's a HR problem. I mean, that's you're not doing the right. Either you don't understand your culture, or you're not recruiting for your culture.
Well, absolutely. And recruiting is an interesting thing because there's a facade that the two sides put out there when in the recruiting game.
How do you mean?
The organization itself has a projected presentation or projected understanding of who they are and what they do. And you've got the handbook, and we're all about this and that, and and it's the idealized version, right? And the same
3
thing
weeks in.
okay. Yeah, and on the same time, employees also present their idealized version. Everybody's a team player, and everybody's a self-starter, and you start to see the patterns of what it's all about. But at the end of the day,
There's no I in team.
Oh yeah, no I in team. At the same time, it's finding out what's behind the scenes. There was a while there where because I run a small agency. While I'm at the end of the day the final decision maker and who gets hired and who doesn't, I decided that I'm going to bring in the team to be part of that decision making. And what I did was I invited the potential recruit to sit down with the team, and I would be not in the room. And I would say, I want you guys to hash it out. I want the new person to get a feel for who they're going to be working with. And I want the team to also get a feel for the person that they're going to be working with and how well they vibe with them. And that way, I'm not just, working on my own biases or the facade of, the very cordial interview and the well-crafted resume and all of that. You're getting good gut vibe check from a series of people that are because you're integrating someone into a team. You're putting in a new person, and you want to make sure that they connect. So that was an interesting process. It worked out really well. You get a lot of really interesting feedback from every team member, and at the end of the day, it's the outcome was really good.
Yeah, I remember I can't remember which company it was, but I remember one company talking about how, as part of their process, they like to have the recruit or recruits mesh with the team in an offsite, like in some sort of offsite type of environment, whether it's going out for dinner or going bowling or something like that, like an out of the office type of experience where you can see them operating kind of in the wild, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I thought that was very, very insightful to put that component in, because it's interesting to see how people behave, like either in groups, when they don't think people are watching them, and all those types of things. I think that really has, I mean, can you do it for every hire? Maybe not, but I think, in some cases it's important.
Yeah. And it makes the process a little longer, but you do get an effective outcome. And does it work for every recruit or every role? Not always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it depends on the size of the team as well. A smaller team, obviously, it's different. Okay, so let's switch topics. AI. I mean,
Mhm.
AI is everywhere. I know it's all over your space. I know that you yourself are doing a lot of work in the AI space. When it comes to product, I heard somebody say, I really got to take notes as to who these people are before I talk about them, but whatever, I'll get better
So
at
much
that.
going on in AI. Like it's really hard to keep track.
They were saying how, you know, if you've got AI or your employees are using AI, they should be 2, 3, 4, 5 times more productive than they were before AI.
Mhm.
And I heard that and I was like, And at the end of that phrase, he was saying you should be paying them accordingly. And I'm saying to myself, like, oh yeah, okay. Your employee costs are usually in the range of 30 to 40% of your total, expenditure. I mean, who can do that? Who can pay their employees 2 or 3 times? So I guess my question is, do you think AI has reached the point where it's making employees um, visibly more productive, and is that productivity hitting the bottom line? Like, are people hiring slower because their people are being able to put more output? Like, what have you seen in the landscape?
So there's a few things there in terms of productivity. It's the biggest buzzword because everybody wants more from the same amount of hours. And From my perspective, the productivity enhancements are not necessarily in producing more output, but getting more quality from it and having a little more consistency. So the way I look at it internally here on our side is having, let's say, an AI agent or a specialized custom GPT or whatever it is that you want to help you smooth things or make things faster. It's to, one, get rid of the grunt work, right? Since the invention of computers or any mechanical machine, the reason we invented them is to reduce the grunt work. We didn't want to toil the land, so we figured out the plow, saved our backs. But, when went off and it says, well, we need more of this. I mean, sure, better crops, more consistent harvests, all of that. Same thing with electricity, was able to do all sorts of things. And we started to look at our jobs a little bit differently. All right. Instead of doing the repetitive menial stuff, we were able to hand it over to the machines, and, software did that as well. Like, you didn't need to copy, paste cell by cell by cell in an Excel spreadsheet. You just hold the thing down and drag, and you're like, et voila. Now, did everybody start going off and saying, I want more output from you now that you can drag a cell down? No. Right? It just meant less mistakes, better quality of output, less frustration, and more time to think about bigger things. Because when you have the lower level tasks taken care of, you can think bigger. And the question is how do you think bigger now that you've got that weight off of your shoulder from the menial things that you got to move things around here and do this over there, and you know what I mean? Like,
Do you think management's ready for that? Like, in general?
um, I mean, in some cases, some management feel like as long as someone's busy and doing things, they're doing well. It's kind of like that Towers of Hanoi. As long as they're moving things around, that's the end goal. You can finish that game in 15 moves, right? Or you can spend 2 weeks doing it, right? If you're better at what you're doing it in 15 moves. It just means that you think better and you think smarter, right?
Yeah, I think the measurement criteria needs to change. I think the measurement criteria is still usually bottom line. It's usually sales revenue or some form of units type of measurement. I don't know that we've really gotten good at measuring quality. I think we're still into the quantity measurement. I don't know that we've really gotten better at measuring quality. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I think you're absolutely right. And, this comes to the second question that you had was, are you seeing people slowing down on hiring because of AI? And there is a fundamental shift that's happening right now. Most people are thinking all of the things that, let's say I would hire an intern or a junior to do, move things files from here, create these baseline PowerPoint templates, for instance, or,
Sort these
the
PDFs.
Exactly. That's all of those little tiny things are those quality of life enhancements that AI has come about. And we still don't know what to do with that change, which means now we have to rethink what we're hiring juniors to do, because nobody in their right mind in the business world is like, I don't want to hire any more juniors. I can get an AI to do it. That's just going to kill the future. Right. And 10 years down the line, you're like, who am I hiring? There's nobody left to hire because nobody's got any experience. No one was hired in the last while. So we have to have this
And last time I
fundamental.
checked, there's no chappies lining up at the HR department looking to put in their CVs.
Exactly. Yeah. And might happen. I don't know. I'm not going to make any predictions.
Imagine chatbots, sending in applications for jobs,
All right. Oh, that'll be the wildest thing you'll
will
ever
work
see.
for tokens,
You have to haggle the salary of a chatbot.
It's interesting. So I mean, from a sustainability point of view, I think what you said earlier applies in this case. This idea of the rise of the generalist. The idea that young people today, and this isn't new. I mean, I remember reading HBR articles about this 10 years ago, about the reskilling and being adaptive in your skill sets, and not being siloed. I mean, this has been around for a while now. I think post COVID and now with the adoption of AI, it's gotten even more important to have that mindset. I remember reading something recently saying that the average millennial is going to have 6 or 7 career changes in their working lifespan. I mean, we're not talking about job changes; we're talking about career changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what you said about, being adaptive is important. So with that in mind, I mean, should employers be paying their employees to learn? Like, and when I say learn, I don't mean learn how to do their job better. I mean, just learn, period.
Oh,
And like giving
absolutely.
them like learning credits, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Like every employee should be investing in the career growth of their employees. They should, at every stage, understand what is it their employees want to learn or where they want to go in their career, and facilitate a path forward for that. Right. Because at the end of the day, no employee it's not the 50s. No one's going to last till retirement. And then you give them the gold watch and a ceremonial sort of like party. Right. They're going to be with you for between 3 to 5 years tops. Then the younger they are, the quicker the turnaround, because they want to get the varying different experiences. And you got to work with that, right? This is their prime time, and whatever they learn, they're going to bring back to their role, right? And they're going to come in with a fresh perspective. When you're a little older, it's really hard to continuously learn everything. And even though I said that in the beginning, that in marketing you have to keep learning, but you can't learn everything, right? Because you got to focus on the business in itself. But coming back to the comment that you said about millennials will have 6 to 7 career changes in their lifetime. I'm looking at current Gen Zs and younger folk whose aspirations are to become a content creator.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very common, it's a very common aspiration. But if you look at the core of what a content creator is, that is literally 7 jobs. right? You have to ideate, you have to be creative, you have to be, communicative, you have to be business minded with brand deals, collaborations, sponsorships. You got to be a video editor. You got to really, do the research to understand your audience. You got to do A/B testing to figure out which YouTube thumbnail did better than others. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be a statistician. You're looking at
It's
graphs and
UI, that's
charts.
UX, it's copywriting, it's a whole bunch of things.
Oh yeah, photographer, videographer, editor, copywriter, social media specialist, the works, right? And this is why it's sort of like looking at generational shifts. There's no way you were going to get someone in a Gen Xer to kind of go off and say you're going to do all of those roles and be all of that, and that's your one job. But you can talk to a creator and they're volunteering to do that because they want to learn everything and be specialist in it, and then they'll let go of the reins and say, okay, now I got an editor and I gotta, so
Yeah,
it's a very different dynamic.
I think when you look longer down the road of history and you look at how technology has impacted business and commerce and all manner of aspects of life, I think the one thing that always the common denominator is people do business with people. People don't do business with machines or computers or systems. People do business with people. So the more we can understand how to interact and to collaborate with groups of people, I think that's always the person or group or company that is skilled at doing that seems to always win.
Oh yeah. And AI is part of that journey. It's definitely an accelerator of how to understand. I had a webinar episode with a AI strategist on our webinar, and one of the things that came out of it is how do you use AI to ingest and digest large large sets of unstructured data, right? So you're trying to, from a marketing standpoint, to understand the landscape that you're going out. You're pivoting in a certain way. You want to understand your product, right? If you were to go off and get an intern and a junior and a senior and get them in a room and say, okay, we're going to go through all of the Reddit posts about our product and look at all the G2 reviews and look at listen to all our customer calls and look at all our support tickets and take all of that in and one by one read through it and try to figure out exactly what it is. And you got 3 people doing all of that. You can do that with AI so much faster, and its pattern matching and pattern recognition can pull out insights you wouldn't have known. Now, it's still up to you what you do with it, right? It's still up to you to make the decision.
Well, there's the interpretation. I mean, ChatGPT can do the correlation, it can do the computation, and it might be able to guess at the correlation, but it's the wisdom and experience and understanding of the humans that are involved in the process that have to really apply that knowledge to understanding the human behavior behind the data.
Absolutely. So this now becomes, you would think that, let's say a younger intern or a junior is now negated out of that conversation. But the mentorship model there, you would still have those 3 people in the room. And the conversations are, what are the questions to ask this AI about this insanely large data set? What are the key strategic questions that should be asked? And, and the junior will come in with some light level stuff. And, the senior who's more, who's got years of experience of data analysis will go off, no, you got to look at this because this correlation or this vector or this data set. And that person will learn more about how to manage large sets of data, when that was something that was only relegated to data scientists to a certain degree. How do you ask the better questions?
Yeah.
And that comes to how do you think better?
Right. Yeah. And again, it goes back to what you said earlier. You have to understand the why. You have to understand the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. Because, I mean, yes, you can probably engineer a prompt that will understand your culture, but it's going to be, in the hindsight, it's not going to be future looking. It's going to be amassing information based on the past, not based on the future. And I think that humans have a great ability to look at what's going on now and what has gone on in the past, and project or predict what, where we could be going in light of that information.
Absolutely. At the end of the day,
I mean, culturally speaking, I mean, yeah, computers better at, modeling out numbers and things like that. But again, that's always based on what's happening now or what has happened. I mean, I don't think there's any model that predicted COVID that would say, oh yeah, we think COVID's right up, about 5 months away. So let's redirect everything so that when COVID hits, we'll be okay. There's no model that can do that.
No, at the end of the day, it's the creativity of what we think about it. And, the AIs will be using data sets and decisions made in the past. But us, in terms of thinking about what humans are going to want in the future, although we're probably very bad at it, there are some of us that are better at it than others. And that comes from really understanding culture and people and having experiences and world experiences, make you better at, seeing where that wind is going to blow.
Yeah, I think someone summed it up really well when they said that, these tools like AI might be great at crafting, the words and maybe crafting the images like Midjourney and things like that. But it's, what is the story you want to tell, and why do you want to tell it, and who do you want to tell it to? Those are the decisions that humans have to make. Those are the decisions that we as leaders have to make.
Yeah. There is a wonderful example of creative thinking, and it's I'm not sure if you ever heard of Rory Sutherland. He's a he's a British marketer, and there's a story that he has of a building that has, this is back in the 70s, and they got these elevators that are really slow. All right, so they go out, they get some contractors. Contractors look at, the elevators and how much it's going to cost to change the shaft, because they need bigger machines and all of that. And it was going to cost the building managers or the owners, millions of dollars to change it. And the solution was not to refit everything. The core problem was people were getting anxious and impatient when they had nothing to do waiting for these elevators. So a very cheap solution, they put mirrors around the elevators. And that way, when people are hanging around over there, they're fixing their hair, they're doing their tie-up, they're putting makeup.
Checking out the other people in the elevator.
Yeah. So now the time that the anticipated anxiety of waiting got shrunk down because you got something to do. Saved the building millions of dollars. If you were to put that example into an AI, it'll give you all the numbers of like how to, just like an engineer or someone who's focused on the wrong, the problem in itself. But the human part is the part that became very creative. Now, everywhere you go, there's mirrors at every elevator.
Yeah. I think that's about the time when Muzak was started too, I think.
That too, yeah. Well, that was a terrible idea.
So Third Wunder, you're doing a lot of amazing things. I think in the prep we were talking about some of the events you've got going on. I think you do a regular call with. Tell us about this this webinar thing that you got going on.
Yeah, so we run a monthly webinar. It's every third Wednesday of the month. We just had one earlier today, which was great. And I talk to experts in their fields, other business owners, and specialists in the marketing, design, and technology space. And we focus on a few things, playing on the name of the business, Third Wunder. We're looking at 3 shifts that if you were to look at whatever you're doing right now in the marketing or design space differently, if you make these 3 changes, it'll change the way it'll change the output of what you do for the better. So today we talked about strategic storytelling in go-to-market, like how to rethink the way you position yourself, or how do you gather information about what you need to do, what you need to tell your story, how to craft that message, and then how to apply that in your go-to messaging, go-to-marketing messaging to connect better to your audience. So it's 3 shifts to change the way you do something very particular about in your business. And it's every third Wednesday of the month, the third Wednesday webinar.
Wow. Okay. So that's cool. Is that open to the public, or you have to sign up for something? You have to be a member of something?
No, you can find it on our website, thirdwunder.com/webinars. We've got one coming up soon. We've just got to schedule that one out. But every month, every third Wednesday, you'll get a notification when you subscribe to the newsletter we have there. And yeah.
Cool. I love it. I think it's so, I mean, I don't know how many times I have, these battles with people about, they say, oh, how much, should I produce? Like, how much content should I produce? And the answer is always as much as possible, like as much as is humanly possible. And then the pushback is always, well, yeah, but like I'm charging for this. Like, this is what I charge. This is how I make my money. I mean, I can't be just giving it away. When you hear that, I mean, I know what my answer is. What is your answer when you hear that?
Telling people how to do something versus them being able to do it well is a very different story. Everybody thinks that they're the Karate Kid. They're going to want to learn karate in like 3 weeks and then become the all-star or all-valley champion or whatever it is and beat up the kids that have got black belts and been doing it for years. It doesn't work that way. All right. You might know how to do the thing conceptually, but actually doing it and having that multilateral thinking about all of the things is a different story. So I'm okay with telling people how to do all of the things and give them insights. But at the end of the day, if you really want something craftfully done with expertise, with intention, with a background and body of knowledge, and experiences to find those in between stories that you might not, or in between experiences that you'll never have unless you've gone through the motions, you go with someone.
Yeah, I heard, I think it was Alex Hormozy. I got one name, at least one name. I got Alex Hormozy, talking about how, if I, because he had that attitude. He talks about how he had that attitude of like social media is for kids, and you got to focus on the business, and you got to focus on the grind, and like execute, and that's how you succeed. And he was convinced otherwise when someone made him understand that you don't put out content to impress people about the content. You put out content to create a following. You put out content so that people can feel who you are, can get a sense of who you are as a brand, as a company, as a product, and then make a decision as to whether they like you. And then the engagement will begin. It's not about, creating the ultimate course in something or other, or creating like the best, Pulitzer Prize content, which is what holds so many people back. They just say, well, it's all been said, it's all been done, it's all been written, like, how am I going to add to that? Right. And that's missing the point.
Absolutely. And, everybody's got a unique background, a lived experience that is not something that is, everybody else has gone through. And having a little bit of that perspective really is the secret sauce there. At the same time, growing your following, yes, being super 100% polished with, all the details figured out. Most people don't know all the details on the first try. Just get in there. Just do it.
Make a bunch of mistakes and learn along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other thing, I think, what's that?
I was going to say, you will learn also a lot more from the engagements you have from the earlier pieces of content. You'll get suggestions, you'll get feedback, you'll get comments, you'll get follow-up questions that you're like, well, next time I'm going to include this, or I'll try this. And you just get better that way.
Yeah, I think it's 100% right. I think the other thing that a lot of people that are struggling, with regards to content creation and marketing, and especially when you talk about older, more established businesses, they have to understand that today, you could make a better mousetrap, but if people don't like you, they don't like your brand, they don't like what you stand for, they will buy the other guy's mousetrap, even if it's inferior to yours. It's just the new reality.
Yeah, there's the personal brand, and then there's the business brand. Because at the end of the day, most people think the brand is what you put out there about yourself. the brand is really what people think of you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Branding is receptive, right? So the more you work on people's or your audience's perception of you to improve that, you solidify your brand, you grow your brand, and you establish your brand. But if you think that, you know, I've got a pretty logo and, you know, some colors and all of that, and I'm going to come in hot with like whatever it is my personality is, and that's your brand. No, a brand is honed over time. It's sculpted. It's not you don't buy it on Temu.
That's true. And I think the other thing that people don't realize, I mean, maybe it's changed, maybe my number is skewed, but I seem to remember some wild figure, like it was less than 5% of people are creating content like consistently. Like there's people, I think people have this idea that there's this massive amount of people creating content like consistently that are, and I mean, you're in the game. I mean, is that true? Is that number still real, or has it changed a lot?
Oh yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, the loudest voices are the ones that get the most attention. And we're still humans, you know, like psychologically, the idea of, you know, having 150 people around us from like our lizard brain from the caveman days, that's a lot of people, right? So if you're opening up YouTube or LinkedIn or Instagram and you're seeing that many people doing stuff, you think everybody's doing it. But really, it's a minority of a minority that is reaching you and is connecting with you on the things that you like. And we
Yeah.
live in the world of the algorithm, so it feels like a fire hose, but it's drips. And I'll take LinkedIn for an example. I think LinkedIn is about 1 billion users now,
Wow.
but under 3% actually create content on the regular basis, and under 1% on like on a monthly basis. Like if you get to the weekly side or like the daily side, that goes down to like 0.1%.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I think people underestimate what that means in terms of your ability to reach people. I mean, you go back pre-internet days and you wanted to put, I don't know, an ad on NBC, ABC, CBS, you know, forget the Super Bowl, like just during a primetime TV show. How much money is that going to cost you? I mean, especially if you're, you know, not talking about a local market ad, you're talking about a national ad. You know, we're talking like multiple millions of dollars. And here you have this ability to reach potentially 1 billion people. And all you need to do is just spend the time. You just need to invest the time, have a plan, have a message, and invest the time.
I'll say this. When I first got into digital marketing, it was when I joined that startup when I first moved to Canada. And we all of a sudden we were doing something online and the world was our oyster. And it was the funniest thing is that we built an app that people liked, except it was a global audience. And we would go over to marketing agencies here, local marketing agencies in Montreal, and they would talk to us about billboards and radio and print and TV. And we're like, one, we don't have the budget for that. We're a scrappy bunch and we don't have, you know, a budget for a giant billboard on carry kind of thing. And all of our users were in Asia, parts of Eastern Europe, Latin America, parts of the US and all that. How do we get to all of those? And they're like, well, you know, we've got contacts in Lebanon that can put a billboard. And we're like, no.
Yeah, we're not Procter and Gamble.
No. So having to learn the ropes over time and figure things out. And at the time, I would go to these conventions, you know, Facebook Connect and like small meetups here and there and demo days and all of that. And I'm like, have you figured it out? And they're like, I don't know, man. I did this thing last week and it worked. And I'm like, what was it? And it's like, if you put a lens flare on your ad, people like that. And the next thing, everybody's got lens flares. And then it stopped working. And you're like, why did it stop working? But it was that iterative trying to figure things out, A/B testing, throwing things against the wall, and then you finally get to crack it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who think, you know, oh, I did it 3 times or 5 times or 6 times and it didn't work, you know, and you tell them like, well, if you put a newspaper ad 25 years ago and you only put it in 3 times, you think that would work? I mean, that wouldn't work either.
It's the same type of rationale of saying,
So for the young folks that are listening, a newspaper is this big flat thing of paper, and there was type and pictures on. Just look it up, Google it. You'll find.
It's got words. It folds, and people put it under their armpit in the news on the bus. But yeah, trying out a few things just a couple of times here and there. And I get a lot of clients that came in and they're like, oh, we don't want to do that. We've tried it before. I'm like, how many times have you tried it? And they're like, oh, we've given it a go 3 or 4 times. And it's like, okay, yeah. It's like trying to say that you want to look like Chris Hemsworth, but you went to the gym 3 or 4 times. And you're like, right?
Yeah, no, I think people just underestimate the value of it. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation for another podcast, perhaps. But I mean, there's the idea of putting out content, but then there's what do you do with the attention when you've got it, right? How do you capitalize on that information or that audience once you've got their attention? I think that's a whole other, it's the yin and the yang. It's the flip side of the whole thing. I think a lot of people are getting a hang of the content creation. They're getting a hang of putting the content out. They're getting the hang of building audiences, but I think they haven't figured out, the conversion process quite yet. I think a lot of people thought that, well, if I do all the marketing and I get all these people come into my website or come into my YouTube channel or whatever, then it's going to turn into sales and it's going to turn into revenue. And you say to them, like, listen, if you don't have a sales process, if you don't have a way of turning them into clients or getting them to buy your product, and you just like throwing stuff out there, that's not going to work either.
Yeah. And you got to be ready for it. When I first started learning how to play tennis, I was very adamant on learning how to serve. And I would spend days on the court just on my own learning how to serve. And then I went out to play a game and the guy hit it back. I didn't know what to do. All right. The end of the game was gone. I was just like, I've been practicing putting it out there. I just didn't know what to do when they actually, responded.
That's a great example. I love it.
Yeah. So it's a game, communication's a game. Putting it yourself out there is a game. Always listen to feedback, get people's responses, see how they react to things. It's a back and forth, and it's a conversation.
Yeah, I think we've gone full circle in this conversation because you're absolutely right. It's a question of being willing to communicate, being open to criticism, working as a team, either with your internal team or, your clients as a team or your prospects as a team. That back and forth of communication and being able to listen and adapt has I think always been, crucial for any endeavor, business endeavor, political endeavor, religious endeavor, social endeavor, whatever you call it. That's the key.
Absolutely.
Mohamed, this has been amazing, brother. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I think we put a lot of value out there for people. We're going to have the show notes. We're going to have links to all the social media. Folks, if you enjoyed this podcast, no one's getting paid here. So hit up Mohamed and, check out his website. Third Wunder, is it thirdwunder.com?
It's Third Wunder, Wunder with a U. So ThirdWunder.com. And yeah, in the show notes, connect with me, follow me. It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, George. This has been a super fun afternoon.
Cool. Well, much appreciated. Look forward to our next conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Hey everybody, hope you got a lot of value from this show. Please like and subscribe and share this with other entrepreneurs that you know. Together, we can get the word out and help as many entrepreneurs as possible lead like a boss. Take care and see you next time.